now I'll introduce the star of today's show. We are lucky enough to be joined again by Joe Conley. Joe is the manager of solutions architecture here at Bonterra, a wealth of knowledge in all of our tools, specifically within our fundraising world as a whole. And Joe's been with Bonterra for 2.5 years, where he manages a full team of solutions architects who are, really designed to be experts in our products and tools. And with his expertise as a teacher, presenter, writer, and fundraiser, Joe really helps organizations communicate their ideas and identity to their constituents. And Joe lives currently outside of Boston, Massachusetts, with his wife and 2 children. So, Joe, thank you for being here. I will stop my share and let you jump in and take it away.
Awesome. So thank you all for being here. Like Amanda said, as we're going through, please definitely for questions, ask them in the Q&A because I will be monitoring that. There is no way I'll be able to keep up with the chat. It just goes too hot and heavy. But today we want to be talking about events and specifically how to get the most out of them. Now, importantly, as we're going through this, I wouldn't call this just fundraising events 101. My expectation is that many of you are currently running events, merely doing events, and of course know what fundraising and an event is. At the same time, though, I want to be clear that this is not like the advanced PhD level of training on fundraising events, right? These are not the highest level, the secrets. We're somewhere in between, maybe like a 201 level class when we're talking about our fundraising events. So to jump in, 5 main steps that we're going through when it comes to working on this event. First, we want to define the goal of the event. Second, define who's coming to that event. Third, build the landing page. 4, manage the event. And then finally, 5, we want to follow up on that event. So the most important part of this entire presentation, this entire conversation, if you have to leave after this, you have gotten the most important thing is to define the goal of your event. The goal of your event should absolutely not be to have it because we've always had it, and so we feel like we need to always continue to have it. That's a terrible goal for an event. It's a terrible reason to have events. Events take a lot of work. Events are a big investment. We want to make sure there's a really clear goal. Now, the goal of your event as well should not be something as simple as, well, we want everyone to have fun, or we want our donors to feel appreciated. Because while those are important things, we certainly want everyone to have fun at our event. If everyone is just utterly miserable, it's probably not a very good event. We can't measure those. We can't then use that information to decide if this event was effective or not in ultimately furthering the mission. So some events have pretty straightforward, pretty easy goals, right? If we're having a fundraising event, we want to make sure that our event nets X number of dollars. Now, I hit that net emphasis as well, because if we're just reporting out on the gross, that's not an effective number. Heck, if our event raises $1 million, that sounds great. But if it cost us $999,999 to have that event, well, that's probably not a particularly effective fundraising event. So it's crucially important that even when we're talking about a fundraising event, that we're considering the net. But for all sorts of other kinds of events, it's still important that we have metrics that are going around this. As an example, let's say it is a donor appreciation event. We just want to have everyone who came, who donated last year, come to this event. Well, how are we going to then effectively measure if those donors felt appreciated? And there's a handful of different ways to do it. One is to then see how many of those donors donate in the 3 months after the event. If you really want to get fancy with it, look at people who did give last year, but who didn't come to the event and see if that donation rate is any different. If that group donates at the exact same rate that the people who attended the event did, well, it's unlikely that the event drove donations. On the other hand, if you see that they gave more or more of them gave, then yeah, that can be a pretty good indication. Other things you can have as goals for events, right? Maybe, yes, this is donor appreciation, but one of the things we're really trying to drive is recurring donors. So again, See within the next 3 months after the event, what percentage of those attendees became recurring donors. Those are just a couple of examples. And again, where I often hear people struggle is not the fundraising event, but things like the donor appreciation event. Similar to if you have major giving events, you have some major giver who's got a fancy house on the coast, likes to allow you to invite other people to come to a cocktail party. Again, 3 months might be too short for a major gift. 6 months or 9 months, whatever cadence you identify, can figure out those outcomes. The crucially important thing is that you have set metrics so that you can then use those metrics to evaluate how effective your event was to actually have a goal. Because everything else we're going to be talking about, who's on the list? Well, it depends on our goal. What should the landing page look like? It depends on our goal. As we're going through, what are we doing during the event? Depends on our goal. What should our follow up be? It depends on the goal. I'm going to say this real strongly, but I really believe it. If you don't have that defined goal, you should just scrap the event because without that goal, there is no event. Speaking of that, where are you all feeling about your events and the goals to them? Here comes a poll.
All right, I'll give folks a couple of seconds to let us know where they are with their events. Looks like Joe, big news. Looks like the majority of people are saying yes, their events have clearly defined goals. So good to see. But we are seeing around 30% of folks saying they don't, but they will now, or no, and they still don't know where to start. So pretty good split, but majority of folks are saying that yes, they've got that goal defined.
Very cool. I'm glad to hear that. For those of you, especially if anybody's in a no, I still don't know where to start. Feel free to, and I'm just going to give a minute here, drop an example of your event that you're not sure how to start right here in the Q&A, and we can try and workshop it as a team. Obviously, we can't do that for everybody, and I know sometimes typing can take a while, so I'm going to blab for a minute as you give that chance. But if you really do feel stuck, there's a lot of big brains on this call. Let's see if we can workshop how you could have a goal for that particular event. Now, and tell me a little bit about the event, right? So we can understand where you're bumping into. How do I get a goal for that event?
I saw Amanda did put in the chat that a live raffle auction at our upcoming gala in less than 3 weeks.
Great. So with this auction, right? Seems like it's a pretty straightforward case, unless I'm missing it, where with that particular event, right? If you're having an auction, you're looking to raise money. Usually that's part of the gala as well. So step one, of course, will be understanding, yes, we need to raise money. But the other thing that'll be important to define, right, is what will be the set goal for that auction item. Now, typically, we want to think about starting an auction around 10 to 20% of the value of the item, right? Because in general, at least when we start the auction, we want to make sure that the donors are pulled in and thinking, hey, this is cool, this is a good deal. And then as the auction goes up, people get ramped up. It also, I've seen, very much helps if you're serving alcohol at your gala for those live auctions, as people start to compete with one another. And then suddenly a handshake goes for $10,000. No, we are, Sandy. I'm just trying to pull from both places. Sure. So I'm seeing a couple of other great examples. Now, Reverend Leslie says a school Founders Day celebration. Goals could be scholarships, operations, program support, facility, faculty support, but it's at the same event to the same constituency. Great. So, two thoughts here. Thought number one would be it is a fundraising event, right? You can have a high level goal. So at this event, we need to net, and remember that net, $10,000. That would feel pretty low, actually, but we'll use that because numbers are hard and math is also hard. But from there, you could also start to set goals around, if those are different areas that somebody's able to donate, which are most important. slash which you need more for, right? So if the example here, scholarships of that 10,000, we need really 7,000 in scholarships, and then the remaining 3,000 can be broken down across the others. How close do you get to the percentage breakdown that you actually need in order for those programs to be valid or not valid to function, right? And then as you're doing that, when it comes to managing the event itself, figure out how we're going to set it up so that people are predisposed to support that in particular. So if I really need scholarships, I'm probably going to ask a scholarship recipient to come and talk at the event, and that's going to be the big thing that I highlight. On the other hand, if I really need facility support, I might ask the facility manager to come in and talk, right? And emphasize that instead. So thinking about the managing of the event, manage it in a way that prioritizes the organization's needs. And Cynthia asks a crucially important question here. What if the senior leadership team has conflicting notions of the goals of the event? That's incredibly, incredibly difficult, right? When mommy and daddy are fighting, it's very, very hard for us to figure out what we need to do. What I will say is this is one way to begin to try and navigate that is to figure out if there's a consensus goal or a consensus level we can hit around those goals. So, for example, if it's the different areas of funding that we're talking about lifting up, then it's going to be important to maybe have just that comprehensive fundraising goal. Beyond that, oftentimes it's just whoever has the most power is the one who wins, right? So if my boss and somebody else's boss are telling me two different things, I'm going to do what my boss says because that's who my boss is. We could do these all day. I want to make sure that we don't listen on the other things. Let's try one more. Uh, Christina says, I'm hosting a Friends of the Fund social. Our goal is to bring community members to the table that are not familiar with our fund. We are also recognizing our major donors that have come forward last year. We're using our information that links to their donorship to show what we can accomplish and what we are looking to accomplish. Our measure will be if we receive more donor interest. Great. Love this example. And as I'm reading this out, please also jump into the chat. But I think the important thing to note here is what does it mean to come to the table, right? So trying to bring community cables to the table. How do you measure that they came to the table? If you're looking to say that someone is at the table because they made a gift, great. Number of people who came to the event who made a gift. Did they come to the table because they made an advocacy action, right? Do you do an advocacy program? Then they came to the table because they did that advocacy action. Are you looking to drive volunteership? Is there mentoring that comes as part of this? Is there some other thing that you're then asking them to do following this event? What is that call to action? That is what marks whether or not they came to the table, right? So when you clearly define what came to the table means, that's when you can then define what the goal of the event is and have something to measure it off of it. And again, our measure will be if we receive more donor interest, right? Donor interest is an interesting concept. When you say donor interest, are we thinking about somebody who made a donation? That could work. If you're thinking more about the major donor space, though, then it would be setting a threshold for which that opportunity has to reach to count interest, right? So after the call, major donors are giving their list. They're called out to have conversations with people. Is somebody willing to have a phone conversation? Is that enough? Is that the threshold? Maybe. Maybe it's they have to be willing to go to a meeting, right? And they have to have that one-on-one meeting with the major gift officer. Maybe they have to be at least having a back and forth with an email as part of that conversation, right? Set a threshold, if we're talking about major giving, for which somebody actually counts as interested. And from there, that's what you can measure against. We need to get at least of the, if we're thinking major gifts, let's say 75 people come. Of that 75, we need to get at least 40 of them to have at least had a one-on-one meeting with a major gift officer. That's our goal for the event, and that's what we're going to drive. I can't help myself. One more from Robin here. We are planning a webinar series of training sessions online. We would be available online after, so everyone might not be attend live. Would mainly be for the program beneficiaries, but it would also be possible to mix in fundraising for potential funders that might also be interested in attending, or should we stay in one lane? I think that for any event that you're attending or offering up, even free events, it's totally appropriate to give people an opportunity to make a donation, right? So even if people are interested in donating, you can do that. But what I would say is for the content itself, as part of those training sessions, it's going to be very important that you do focus in one lane, right? So if people come to that training and you spend the entire time thanking donors and talking about how great the work you've done in the past is, they're going to be a little disappointed. Your funders may feel real excited. They're getting their shout out, but the people being trained won't be. On the flip side, right, want to make sure that the funders who are attending are very clear that what they're attending is a training and not just like a fundraising appreciation. It's also very true, by the way, for a webinar, which is why we made it very clear in this webinar that it is a demo with best practices, because we also want to show you our system. How's that for a transition? We're going to hop in and take a look at our system now, because we're going to hit into step 2, defining that invite list. Now, a couple other things that we're going to be providing out for you as part of this. One is our 6-week roadmap for promoting your nonprofit event, best practice tool. Usually you have to jump through a couple of hoops in order to get it on our website, but you attended our event. So we're going to provide that to help you walk through this process. And don't worry, that's going to be, Amanda's going to make sure you get your hands on that. So let's now drop into our Bonterra guided fundraising, previously known as Network for Good. Now, why do we call this tool guided fundraising? The reason we call it guided fundraising is we provide a lot of support and guidance, including the ability to have a personal fundraising coach. So for any of you who are currently on this tool, if you don't have a personal fundraising coach, strongly recommend looking into that. And any of you who are looking at this tool, especially if you're coming off of maybe spreadsheets or just using QuickBooks as your CRM and thinking, man, we really could use some support in fundraising, that's something that our tool offers. So let's go ahead and think about this event that we want to have. We want to, for this event, identify and invite anybody who made a donation last year. Now, for many of you, if you're trying to do that via spreadsheets, you're trying to do that via QuickBooks as your CRM, Airtable, that can get real tough. In the system, though, it's super easy. Head right over into your contacts, and we recommend a filter, not surprisingly, made a donation last calendar year. So you don't have to do any work to then identify that, hey, who is it that donated last year? You're not trying to do spreadsheet filtering. You're just instead selecting made a donation last year. Allows you to then identify that group. Now, of course, who you have attending is going to be heavily driven by exactly what your goal of that event is. If, for example, the goal of this event was to drive new recurring givers, I would be specifically identifying those people who had made multiple gifts last year and who ideally had made them via credit card, right? Because that group is going to be the group that is predisposed to become recurring givers. If I was interested in bringing in potential major donors, there I'd want to look at people who had that potential, right? So people who have already given large amounts. Who gets invited is driven heavily by what kind of event we're hosting. Next, we want to go ahead and build that landing page. Now, again, for many of you, this probably historically has meant going to Evite. Maybe it's meant going into Eventbrite. Maybe it's meant just trying to set up a Google form. Here, though, we're able to build out a new campaign, and specifically an event campaign. Let's say we want to have our summer fun fundraiser, we're going to start to set our goals. Because again, those goals are crucial. I want 150 people to attend, and we're looking to bring in $25,000 as a part of this. Now, do you host an auction with this event? Might feel like a strange question to ask with every single event that's coming through. The reason we ask it with every single event that's coming through is because we have a fantastic event auction tool, and we want to make sure that literally everybody who comes through knows about it. So if you do have an auction, make it very easy to then link the auction tool with this particular event. But if you're not doing an auction right now, no big deal. Of course, because we really want you to take a look at our auction event tool, we'll then shame you a little bit about it if you say no. Great question. Shauna asks, is this people in the system, people we've entered, or are these people that have donated to other causes? Great question. This is all people who are in your system, but the way they've gotten into this system can be myriad. So maybe they entered in the system because they donated. Maybe they were entered into the system because they signed up for your newsletter, because you're also sending your newsletter out of this tool. Maybe they got into the system because they attended a previous event. Maybe they got into the system because you manually entered them in after receiving a business card at a function. Maybe you had a list from somewhere else, whether it's on a spreadsheet or other tool, and imported it into the system. Maybe you and another organization have a list exchange agreement. All of those are ways that the names could have gotten into the system. But yes, they all do live in the system. And I do see some questions there being dropped into the chat. Let me know in the Q&A, just because, like I said, there's no way I'm going to be able to keep track of the chat if you've got questions. When is our event happening? Well, we said it's in the summer. Let's say June 8th. And again, June 8th. Oh, yeah. What kind of features do we need with our events? Go ahead and hit next to build our event. Want to understand if this event is a hybrid, a virtual, or in person. In this case, we're going to do it as an in-person event, and we can start to track information about it, right? Where's it going to happen? That works. What ticket levels do we have? Now, importantly, you can always have free ticket levels, right? That doesn't mean you can't register for them, can't keep track of them. In this case, though, we're going to do paid. Control. $25. And some important other features. Importantly, we want to track the fair market value of the ticket. Now, I know that all of you good fundraising backgrounds know what I'm talking about with fair market value, but this is why it's important to do things in an actual fundraising system and not trying to take a different system and force it to work this way. Because things that are normal to all of us, like fair market value, are not so normal to the for-profit world. How many tickets are available? Does this ticket represent a guest? What do they mean by that? Why would it not represent a guest? Well, for some of you, you may have tickets that have sponsorship levels, and I may be a gold sponsor as an organization, which means I get my name in the program, but it's not actually representing a person who's attending. How many tickets, guests does this ticket represent? Right now, it's just representing one. It's an individual, but maybe we have a discount for couples. And so if two people are attending together, I want to make sure that when they hit that couple level, it counts as two. And then finally, do we want to adjust the availability, right? So if you have early bird tickets, want to make sure that you don't have to go in and manually manage. Here's where the early bird ticket starts. Here's where it ends. Want to make sure the system's taking care of that for you. So we're going to start with just one, but of course you can have many. Cynthia's got a question here. Can you have multiple goals for an event, i.e. attract new donors, attract X number of check donors versus credit card donors, attract Gen X, Gen Y donors, etc.? Yes, you absolutely can have multiple goals, but you want to make sure two things are true. One, that the goals don't start to conflict with one another, right? So we want to make sure that if we're trying to bring in new donors, we're not also trying to maximize our major donors, right? These are going to be very different kinds of events, especially as your events are smaller. The second thing is we don't want to start to dilute the events and the effectiveness that we're trying to have, right? Because here's the thing, if I have 5 different goals for this different event, it's very unlikely that I'm going to be able to hit them all. And what will end up happening is I'll probably just end up lifting up to leadership the ones that I hit and kind of ignoring the ones that I didn't, rather than having a clear strategic focus on the goals, right? So if my goal is specifically to attract more Gen X donors because I'm looking at my major gift pipeline and they're all boomers and I need to increase my mid-level donors, trying to attract more Gen X is a great goal. But I don't want to then say and attract Gen Y donors and also bring in recurring gifts. And when I hit one of those goals, just focus on one, right? Make sure that the goal is aligned to strategy. Cynthia also asks, can you talk about why credit card donors are different than other donors? What makes them unique? So specifically in the context of recurring donors, ideally I want donors who are already willing to and comfortable with giving me their credit card, because when it comes to recurring donors, I want them to be set up on credit card. I want them to run, and I want them to set it and forget it. I don't want to have to then be managing check reminders from back and forth for those recurring donors. In fact, what I really, really want for recurring donors are those ACH donors. If you get someone to set up a recurring donation with their ACH, the retention rate is over 90%. Like, it's incredible. But outside of that, those credit card donors are more likely to become recurring donors. They're more likely to be comfortable just giving me their credit card and setting up that set it and forget it. Now, on the other hand, of course, major donors, I very rarely expect a major donor to make a major gift via credit card. Totally happens, but it's much rarer. Echoing a question from chat, Barry, if we already use every action, do we have access to Bonterra fundraising tools you're showing now? Yes, specifically with this events and auctions piece. So if you're using Bonterra's Every Action, which we are now rebranding as Bonterra Fundraising and Engagement, you do have access to the event and auction tool. Talk to your CSM or your account manager to help you get connected with that, but yes. Michael, what if you have a combination of paid and free tickets? How do you distinguish in the system? Well, great question, Michael. We'd add another ticket type. We'd call it free. And this is our freebie. And so both are currently now available, right? And we want to use the ticket type, that name, individual versus freebie, to help us distinguish between the two. Cool. So Jerry asks, how do you add or change the donor acknowledgement email? The email to the actual donor and an email to the staff who needs the notification that the donation has been made. Sure. So that is something that our system does over with the email. And you'll see that in the contributions, you have the ability to send out those acknowledgements. For more support on that in particular, that's absolutely something that our support team can help you with. So let's go to the next level, where we're able to build out your overall page. Now, if you notice, we make this page intentionally extremely user-friendly, right? We want to make sure that as you're going through, it is very easy to do things like summer fun fundraiser. Add in your details, and you can even list your fundraising goal right on the screen. Now, it is totally 100% appropriate to have a different publicly facing fundraising goal than a private facing fundraising goal. Absolutely allowed. And publicly, we're also typically responding in the gross, right? Because we want that number to be the big, exciting number, right? This event raised $100,000. Totally appropriate. Totally appropriate to have the goal something that you expect to hit so that you can then publicly celebrate it. That doesn't mean that has to be what your team's internal goal is. Totally legitimate to have two different numbers. And then we are good to go. We can publish and view our event dashboard. Should probably set some of these up. In our system. But here we go. This now gives you the event dashboard now that we've created it. Because now we're on to step 4 of managing that event. So I see some more questions here. Great question. So Michelle asked some great questions around the auction tool. For example, how would you pay for a live auction item? Someone is not registered yet. In-kind donations. Would we need iPads and Square? So if you do want to run the payment outside of the system, you would need iPads and Squares. Otherwise, when somebody registers for the auction as part of the auction tool, they have the ability, when they register to put in their payment information that does not then run until the auction completes. So as long as they're running it right through the auction, all of that information is built right in when they register, so they're able to go through and complete. Now, if you are talking about pure live auction, right? So you're not using our tool at all, you're just going in there and raffling off events. There, our tool doesn't have a Square built in, so you'd run that payment separately, or you'd have them write you a check and then enter it into the system like any other offline donation. Kimberly asked the great follow-up question, how would you then get word out about the event? Do you have to somehow direct people to the landing page? Yeah, exactly. So we've created the landing page. We're then going to direct people to it. How are we going to direct people to it? Well, that's exactly why we built that list earlier on. In this case, it was just people who donated last year, but I'm going to use that list to then message those people. And we'll take a look at some of the messaging tools in the next step here. But yes, that's exactly what I would do. I would take that list and I would send them emails. I would send them texts. I might even send them little video snippets to really get them excited about coming to the event. And the good news is I'm not naming anything that our system doesn't already do built in. So when it comes to managing the event itself, there are a few different things that we need to keep an eye on. One, of course, is we need to keep track of those people that are attending. We want to make sure that as they do attend, we're checking them in. And of course, we can always add ticket purchasers as needed. Find that donor. Enter the date that they purchased, what type they purchased, how many, how they paid, and save and exit, right? So this allows us to keep track of those people. I have heard that phrase burn. Yes. From there too, we've got the ability to edit guest information as needed as we go through. Also able to keep track of those offline donations. So again, circling back to that question, if there are donations that we do not have running right through the system, you always have the ability to add it at the back and the ability to generate those communications, circling back to that previous question. Let's go ahead and create our email invite because it's built right into the system. Just like we saw before, it's going to walk us through a real nice widget. Now, I'm already on step 4. How can that be? The reason that can be is because the system is helping me with some of the previous steps. I can go back and change the name, but what is this? It's the Summer Fun Fundraiser invite. What's its purpose? It's an event invitation. Got our detailed event layout, although I can jump it back to simple. So that now as I go to build it, I can use our very easy WYSIWYG, which is a fun word to say, but just means what you see is what you get editor, to go in and build out the language that we're using. Notice that as we're building these out, even have the ability to leverage merge fields. Why is this important? Because if I'm just saying, hey, dear friend, please come and spend money at this event, right? That doesn't feel personal. It makes it feel like I'm just a walking, talking, breathing checkbook. On the other hand, when I can actually say, dear Amanda, please come to this event, starts to make her feel like she's actually a person to us rather than just a source of funding. The subject line for the email, again, crucial as you start. We already help you out. That merge field is there because that, again, really does drive those open rates. Who is it coming from? And the reply to email address. Now I have it going right to my email address, but it certainly can instead go to like an organization email address. And then who are we going to send it to? You do have the ability to send it to everyone. I would encourage, though, for you to be very, very careful around sending things to everyone, because if you just start spamming out everybody with everything, they start unsubscribing, your deliverability goes down. So instead, we're talking about that list. And in this case, we already decided we want people who made a donation last calendar year. And then we're good to send it out. Now, I'm not going to actually send because most of those email addresses are staff here and they will not be excited about receiving that email. But from there, we're good to go and we can track the performance. So let me take a quick deep breath there. So Jerry, what you're seeing there, those fields that have an asterisk and then a bracket, another asterisk, that's called a merge field. And so what that means is that anybody who receives that, it'll be the actual ticket type that they chose and then the actual event. In terms of adding the name, that's just another merge field that you're able to add in to that. So if you wanted to show their personal name, like Dear Bob, you just need to add that in as a merge field. So the last thing we want to talk about, Jerry, is that you're saying this is what showed up in your acknowledgement email after the fact. So actually you sent it and it actually got to the domain provider, like it was in your Gmail and that's what it said. Okay, so if you're just seeing the merge fields, that's strange. That would be very odd. If on the other hand, what you're seeing is that just the merge field is incomplete, go into edit that level. And I'm sorry, my camera's been acting weird on me. It's been dropping. As we go into build, and you're looking at that text, make sure to add into the merge tags, either first name or if you're using it, formal or informal greeting, right? So that'll live under the merge tags. So we built the landing page. We've managed the event. Now we want to follow up. First thing we want to do as part of following that up is actually see the performance of all of our campaigns. And so as we're running our campaigns, we're able to see how each of them is performing, including when the last tickets were purchased, who's attending, and so on. So let's go ahead and take a look at a well-attended event. With all of this information, we're able to understand exactly how the event went and what it accomplished. We can scroll through that again smaller to see the different donation settings, any updates, and so on. Let's head back to campaigns. Let's go into an event one, excuse me. From here, of course, we're able to see those attendees and engage with them. So from there, we want to then decide what our next follow-up steps are based on specifically, did we or did we not achieve our goal? So again, if our goal was a fundraising goal, we looked at that net, did we achieve that goal? If we did, that's fantastic. Let's talk about how much we can increase it next year. Now, our board is always going to be like, cool, double it. But for the rest of us, want to make sure that we're setting more like a 10% increase in terms of what we're hoping to achieve, unless we're doing something radically different. If, on the other hand, we didn't achieve our goal, I want to talk about why and really try and understand what it is that we can do differently in order to achieve it, right? If our goal was recurring givers and we didn't bring in enough recurring givers, did we have the wrong audience? Did we not lift up recurring giving enough? Was the pitch not quite right at the event itself? Or is there some other blocker that's preventing us? So we've got about 13 minutes left. What questions do y'all have? What else would be helpful to talk about? What haven't we engaged with yet?
Yeah, and Joe, really quickly as we're waiting, I know some folks were asking about pricing of the system, wondering what this might look like, how it could work for their organization. So the best thing to do would be to chat with one of our fellow representatives who would be able to do a more personal demonstration with you, kind of see how it would work and fit for your organization. So if that is of interest to you, while you're thinking about your questions here, I'm going to pop up a quick poll to see if you want to explore what you saw today a little further. There's a lot more to the system outside of the events as well. So if you want to take a deeper dive, let us know. I'll leave that up, Joe, as you take a look at questions and people ask those. I did see
Very
a
cool.
question come in about the ability to do surveys for folks within the system.
Sure. So when it comes to building out our system, um, you do have basic abilities to run certain form of survey, right? What we have is we have a generic form that you can then use to ask some questions of those who are potentially interested or potentially want to respond. The reason I am a little bit cautious, depending on how you understand survey, is it's not anonymized. So if you specifically need an anonymized survey, that would be something you'd have to use through a different tool. But as long as you're okay with people identifying who they are, then yes, you absolutely can send back out a survey for them to report what they liked, what they didn't like, and what they would want to try differently next year. Vern, fantastic question. So Vern asks, would this software eliminate the need to use other direct mailing software such as MailChimp? I'm wondering if I could eliminate some of my other monthly costs. Yes, that's kind of why this tool exists, right? The reason this tool exists is to try to consolidate all of those different point solutions that you're currently having to use, right? So if you're having to use, like I said, either a spreadsheet or you're using a like Outlook as your C, or not Outlook, well, I guess Outlook too, potentially as your CRM, but QuickBooks as your CRM. If you are then having to use a MailChimp or a Constant Contact, if you are then having to use the Eventbrite or the Evite for your events, right? We're looking, and then you have to have a separate contract with the payment processor that you're using, like Square. We're consolidating down all of that. That's exactly the point of this system. Great, April. So April says, we're having an event, a fundraising dinner this Friday. So I was most interested in the part about during and after the event. What lingering questions do you have? What about before and after the event would you want to talk about or think through that we haven't yet? And I definitely intentionally use the we because, like I said, a lot of big brains on this call. So it's not just me answering, it's anybody who has some thoughts. So Kimberly asks, gotcha, Kimberly. So uh, I get about reaching out to people on my contact list, but what about a public event? Using social media, local media, how does it all tie in together? I need to build my list. Yeah. So very, very fair. Yes. So there are other ways to advertise for an event that exists beyond just within our system, because our system is only going to allow you to directly email those people who are already in it. So posting on social is a fantastic way to attract new supporters. Depending on who your supporters are, how big your event is, potentially media, but I'd really be intentional about the type of media that you're leveraging, right? A national commercial probably isn't going to be helpful for a local food bank. On the other hand, your local paper, I think, is often a great source for that. In fact, I can tell you for sure, because I'm the treasurer at one of our nonprofits, that our local paper charges us $144 a year for 12 ads in that paper. So that's one of the ways that we get our information out is by using that local paper. It's been very effective. Again, because it's a small local organization. Cynthia asks, what is Bonterra's sweet spot of organizations? Who are your ideal clients? Size, amount of internal technology that already exists, sophistication of fundraising, etc. Fantastic question. And the important thing to note about answering this is Bonterra has two primary fundraising and engagement CRMs. We have Bonterra guided fundraising, which we've looked at today, and then another tool called Bonterra Fundraising Engagement. It used to be called Every Action. So guided fundraising is intentionally our more entry level tool. Usually, and in general, when it comes to Bonterra guided fundraising, this is organizations that predominantly do their fundraising through online forms, maybe a big direct mail appeal or two, and some events. That's who typically uses Bonterra guided fundraising. As organizations get larger, that's when they move into Bonterra fundraising engagement, again, formerly Every Action. Some of the big differences in that space is that the Bonterra fundraising and engagement tool is for organizations that do a lot more robust work around major giving, around planned giving, around more robust grant tracking. That tool does all of that. The other thing that that tool does is it has very robust advocacy functionality. So if your organization does advocacy work, we would direct you in there. Is a very, very, very rough number. often we see under 5,000 contact records trending in the direction of the guided fundraising, and then over 5,000 starts moving into our larger, more robust tool. But that's super, super rough because if you're an organization, you only have, say, 1,000 contact records, but you do a lot of advocacy work, it would be worth being up in the larger tool for the advocacy piece. On the other hand, maybe you're even up to 10,000, 15,000, 20,000 records, but you don't really do major giving. You don't really have robust grant tracking. It really is all just like a big event and online forums. Then you might still be able to hang out in the the guided fundraising world for a while before needing to move up. Marie says, we have Salsa Engage and CRM. Do we have access to Bonterra? So Salsa Engage and Salsa CRM are part of the larger Bonterra family, but they are a distinct product. And that product, you would be able to migrate over to either our guided fundraising or our fundraising engagement tool, the bigger tool. Both of those would be available for you as part of a migration if you were ready to move off of Salsa Engage and CRM. Hey, you're so welcome, Cynthia. Cynthia. I see April asking, okay, how do we maximize the fundraising? Talking about during the event and after the event. Two big things I want you to think about. One is what's happening during the event that is motivating people to open up their checkbooks, right? At the event itself, do you have a speaker who's really tied to the mission, who can talk about why the work is so important? Do you have a compelling thing that you're asking people to support? Now, sometimes it's super easy, like if you're kicking off a capital campaign, easily, boom, right into the capital campaign, big rah rah. But oftentimes we don't need capital campaign funding. We don't want designated funding at all. We need support for our annual fund. That doesn't mean, though, we can't lift up a thing that we're looking to do that the annual fund, the unrestricted funding is going to be a part of, right? So are you looking to really train up your staff? Are you looking to really help fund a program without actually lifting it up as a designation, right? What thing that's happening during the event is encouraging those people to open up the checkbook in a really specific, designated and directed way. And then after the event, number one most important thing I see is ask. I see many, many organizations who, after the event, start to feel concerned. Oh, they just came to an event. I don't want to ask them for money now. They're going to think we're always asked. You're a nonprofit that receives funding through fundraising. Like people expect you to ask for money. So it is absolutely appropriate to, in that follow-up email, give people an opportunity to give, really tying it back directly to what you talked about and what you focused on that event. So if you're highlighting a particular program, highlight that in the email when you make the ask. If you have a program beneficiary who's coming and talking about why it was so important, then highlight that in the follow-up. Fun fact, especially in that case, we're able to send out videos. So another great thing to send out after the event, and I know for Friday this might be a little tight for you, but a video, either a highlight reel, that's tough because your staff's got to be ready to build it real fast, or just say a key component of that person's talk, right? What was their real big oomph moment, their real big call to action? That 30-second clip where they did that, easier because there's less editing work than like a highlight reel, and send that out as part of it.
Awesome, Joe. We probably have time for one more question if you want to field one more, because I know we are about at time.
Great. So Jackie asks, is there any tips for measuring an ongoing educational series / fundraiser? Two big ones. One, if it is an ongoing series, one of the best things for measuring there is retention of participants, right? So if I'm giving a 10-week educational series and I started with 100 and I ended up with 17, that's not a good sign, right? That would show us that the attention to this series wasn't as exciting, wasn't interesting. People were kind of dropping off. That'd be number one. And then number two would be to take it to the next step. And what are you educating the people to do, right? What is the end goal of this education? And then track that. So let's say we are tracking people's financial literacy. Let's do some longitudinal work after the fact. People came to this 3-week series on financial literacy. 3 weeks later, what changes are they reporting? And that's where that great question around surveys can come in. 6 weeks later, what changes are they reporting? A month later, right? Month is less than 6 weeks. 2 months later, 3 months later, what are they reporting, right? Because we want to then track that the education that we're providing is actually efficacious. Now, this is going to take us into another direction, but Bonterra also has a tool for case management specifically. It's called impact management because it's designed to help you track that impact, right? So as you're doing that kind of work, is the education actually taking in a really basic way? Another example, I mentioned our local paper, always seeing reports in the paper about people not using leashes. Maybe you're an animal organization educating people on the value of leashes. How many of those people have report back that now they always use a leash, right? It can be something really, really straightforward and simple, but setting the goal for the actual outcome of what you're educating people on.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Joe. I don't know if you can see there's a ton of thank yous flowing in through the
And
chat saying that
thank
this
you.
was great and super helpful. Really appreciate all of the best practices you weaved throughout the demonstration and conversation here today. And I'm impressed with the amount of hot seat coaching you can do in 1 hour. I think we must have covered like maybe 50 different nonprofits today and helping them out with one small task, and I know is one of many, but hopefully makes a big difference. So really appreciate you and all of your knowledge and insights here, Joe. And thank you to everyone who engaged with us, gave us examples, came with their questions, came ready to learn and open to some new information. Really appreciate all of you being here and the work that you're doing. And certainly hope your next event is a success. And if
Yes.
you are looking to make that a little simpler, if this appealed to you and you want to learn a little bit more, again, would recommend taking a demonstration on a personal level so that you can really work through these examples for your organization. But check out those resources. Be sure to grab that 6-week guide. We've got other resources on our website as well. If you're looking for more events tips, you can go to our blogs or e-guides on our website. Always here to help, always want to make sure that you can get the most out of your events and all of your fundraising activities because we know it's a lot of hard work. So appreciate you and the work you're doing. And Joe, thank you so much again for all of your help and support.
Hey, thank you. Super fun. Hopefully I'll see you all in the next one.
Yeah, take care, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.